recorded at Get a Grip Studios in Toronto, Canada, a Get a Grip management production and in association with the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Financially supported by the good folks at the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, this is Restoring Darkness podcast.
This episode of Restoring Darkness is brought to you by Evluma. If you're serious about contributing to the reduction of light pollution, go to evluma.com, hover over products, and click on Dark Sky Friendly Lighting. Both the OmniMax and AreaMax lights are International Dark Sky Association certified. The warmer color temperatures of the OmniMax reduce the more easily scattered blue wavelengths, which contribute to glare and sky glow. With AreaMax lights, you get full cutoff, which also means no uplight and a significantly reduced contribution to sky glow. And all of Evluma's outdoor lighting product lines come with dimmable drivers for even more control. If your customer is looking for dark sky-friendly fixtures with energy savings while still meeting the demands of decorative lighting, look no further than Evluma. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of dark skies.
Welcome back, folks, to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, I'm honored to be joined by Don Brown. A recognized industry leader in circadian lighting design, Don is driven by a passion for designing lighting solutions that promote human health and wellness. Don's 20-year career is defined by her dedication to continuous improvement and willingness to challenge the status quo. She was one of the first lighting designers in Canada to achieve the Certified Lighting Designer Credential, CLD, adding her name to the CLD database among some of the world's most prestigious and accomplished designers. Her extensive experience spans multiple sectors and a wide array of buildings, including healthcare and long-term care facilities, corporate offices, libraries, post-secondary educational facilities, entertainment and sports complexes. Known for her commitment to environmental stewardship, Dawn develops sustainable lighting solutions that respect the natural environment, having contributed contemporary and inventive lighting designs for multiple WELL and LEED certified buildings. Welcome to the Restoring Darkness podcast, Dawn.
Thank you for having me.
So before we start, sustainable in the lighting industry, in the darkness restoration space, and all that, what does sustainability mean to you?
Longevity. I guess keeping things out of landfills, I guess.
Okay.
Not negatively impacting our environment or causing disruption. And something that we can keep doing long term without having like a huge negative impact on anything.
Yeah, it's one of those terms that kind of evolves. I've been in the lighting industry for over 20 years, and I can remember a time when the CFL was a symbol of sustainability in the lighting industry, and now it's gone from that to one of the things we want to most get rid of, which is mercury in lighting. And so the term is an evolving term. I think it's one of those things that will always be in front of us. And you mentioned continuous improvement in your profile, and I think it's something that we're going to be chasing forever.
Yeah, I think that as an industry, or maybe as a society, we confuse the term or use interchangeably the term or sustainability with energy efficiency. A lot of people think that if something is energy efficient, that it is sustainable, but sustainability goes way beyond that to how easily the product can be broken down and reused, and what is the impact of tossing that product at the end of useful life. So what are the toxic chemicals that are contained? And we know that with fluorescent, there's mercury, but I don't see too many people talking about the fact that we're using gallium in LED.
Sure.
and what's going to happen to all of these LED fixtures that reach end of life. I think if we are really talking sustainability, we're not just focused on energy efficiency. We are thinking about how are we responsibly taking back these products that we're putting out there and reusing them and um, managing all of the components that went into building it in the first place.
So I'll tell you what happens to LED fixtures that burn out right now. I know what happens to them. I'm in Toronto. I run a company called Waste Diversion, and
Mhm.
traditionally that was a fluorescent and HID lamp recycling broker. And so we've recycled millions, and we have end destinations for mercury-containing lamps. We know where they go. We know how much mercury is recovered, what happens to the glass, the phosphor, all these kinds of things. Nobody knows what happens to LED light fixtures at the end of life, except for very few people like me, and they're thrown into boxes with computers and other electronics. It's basically e-waste, so that gets shredded up, and a large portion of it goes to landfill. Probably most of it, because a lot of it is plastic and unreusable metals. And so, the lighting industry was operating on an assumption that LEDs are going to last a really long time. And while we have increased the life of the light source, Don, we've massively decreased the life cycle of the fixture. And so, there's a coming wave of uh, LEDs of all, whether they're premium, they were bought as premium in 2017 or economy grade in homes or whatever. There's a wave of this stuff coming, and we have
Mhm.
no solution for it. The other angle, and I'm going to turn it towards why people listen to this show, which is to talk about darkness restoration and night preservation. The other issue is you mentioned the lumens per watt or the energy efficiency being, hey, it's energy efficient, it must be good. We've created a lot of light pollution with that attitude and with that priority. And Ruskin Hartley was recently, he's the executive director of Dark Skies International, and he's quoted as saying that light pollution is increasing at a rate of 10% a year. This is not sustainable. Okay.
Yeah.
That rate of light pollution. How can we design, or how can we convince clients to design for darkness rather than light?
Um, well, first of all, we need to stop focusing on lumens per watt. Second of all, I think that we need to shift the focus from an optic point of view to light quality point of view. I
Mm,
think we need to look at spectral power distribution
hmm
of all our light sources and recognize the fact that we see better under natural light,
mm,
basically. And light sources that are being manufactured based on lumen efficacy or lumens per watt are missing big, huge portions of the spectrum, the color
mm,
spectrum. And so, what is typically happening is a manufacturer will produce or make an LED for 2700K.
hmm
And then, in order to achieve 3000K, they're spiking the blue content.
hmm
And when we light or apply that light in a darker environment, um, that blue spike is causing us to react in a
mm,
certain way. It's overstimulating our short wavelength cones and understimulating our the rest of our cones that we're collectively using to see.
hmm
And so we know that under different lighting conditions, we adapt. So when we're exposed to bright light, we're adapted to like photopic vision. And we
hmm
know that as we adapt to um, darker environments, our visual acuity or that spectrum of light that activates our rods and cones
hmm
shifts from daytime being like in the green portion of the spectrum toward the blue cyan portion of the spectrum. And so to me, I think that we need to regulate how LEDs are made and we need to set our illuminance targets based on our state of adaptation. So if we are designing for a daytime environment, we call for photopic lumens. If we're designing for a nighttime environment, we call for either mesopic or scotopic lumens. Um, I feel like there's a lot of focus on optical control and reducing light trespass and reducing the amount of lumens that go here, there, or wherever. But really, we need to focus on what is a lumen. And
Mm.
really, lumens in the traditional sense, and what we look up in the IES handbook when we're designing, are lumens based on our daytime adapted
Hmm.
visual state. So I feel like we can design lighting that is 3000K for nighttime environments, but if that 3000K LED is a 70 CRI giving really horrible quality of light, we're going to need more of that in
Mm.
order to see better. If we can have light sources that are more closely matching natural light, like twilight, then we will need less intensity in order to see well. So I think that's where we need to go.
And I want to just, for those listening, a lot of people that listen to the show are not lighting people. So they're
Okay.
more on the environmental side. And so I just want to clarify, because I'm not 100% sure of this either. When you talk about 2700 Kelvin, okay, and you're doing something to the blue light to create it, the blue light is still there. That's correct, right? When I say that, like, even though it
Yep.
appears to be a warm source, you're still
Hmm.
delivering the same stimulus as if it appeared to be a different color. So when we're talking about Kelvin temperature, it doesn't necessarily address the problem. Is that correct, Don?
Yeah. So Kelvin temperature, if if you've ever designed, I'm speaking in terms of a designer, but
That's okay.
if you've ever designed lighting, if you ever tried to light a completely white surface and you had to use multiple light sources because it was just a massive wall or a massive ceiling or something,
Hmm.
there's something that we recognize in the industry is called color shift. And so what will happen is one portion of, say it's a cove, one portion of the cove will be producing like a pinkish sort of tinge to the light, whereas a few feet down the line or a few inches down the line, maybe you might get a little bit off tone. And you don't really notice that until you're applying the light to like a completely white surface.
Hmm.
And so my point is that color temperature is not a very accurate metric to use in order to assess the quality of the light, even the color spectrum of the light, because a light source that is supposed to be 2700 or 3000 or whatever can vary dramatically in terms of the color of light that's actually being put out and therefore reflected back to our eye. So we need to be more precise.
Hmm. So just because something appears to be a warmer color doesn't necessarily mean that the blue light is not on board with that. It's been filtered or
Correct.
in some other way. Yeah. The
So generally speaking, yes, that's true that if you're in the warmer end of the spectrum, you're going to have less blue content, but and then if you're in the higher end of the spectrum, you're going to have more blue content. It's when you get into that middle range of like
mm,
3500, 3000, 4100, which are the common light sources that we use architecturally, that your color content can be shifted quite a bit.
So I have a board of directors, and we've come up
Mhm.
with various terms. Like, one of the in discussions, we talk about darkness restoration and night preservation as a way to call to action for frontline lighting practitioners, right? So when you say
Mhm.
when we say the word dark sky, whether it's a dark sky preserve or there's this, but we think that there is incremental ways that we can restore darkness in our nighttime and our environments which are light polluted. We think that there are incremental ways we can preserve night where it exists. And one of the things that I find very difficult as a lighting distributor is having these kinds of conversations with contractors or commercial property owners or industrial factories where it's very difficult from my perspective to say to a client, hey, why don't we consider less light? Like
Right.
the only purpose to change the lights is to have more light projected further. Like basically, I want to call up Michael, and I want you to come here, and I want you to create way more light pollution, glare, and trespass for me in my parking lot. Like they don't say that, but that's what they're asking for. And I find that, the lighting distributor doesn't have the same authority as a designer in the process of laying out a lighting system. Do you ever have trouble with your clients when you speak about darkness restoration or limiting the light trespass or removing glare or these other, like, do they just want as
Yep.
much light as possible? And how do you have those conversations?
So most of our clients are mostly concerned with not being sued. So they want to make sure that there's enough light to satisfy IES recommendations,
Sure.
because that's typically what is brought up if there's ever an accident.
Sure.
And whether or not it's a recommendation or a standard, it in court
It
holds up
counts
as
for sure.
basically a standard. So, and then the other thing that they're concerned with is how much is it going to cost me?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that everybody wants to profit. That's why we're all in business.
Of course.
And so they need a metric to use in order to say, in order to achieve this, I need to spend this. So right now in our industry, there is a lot of product that is being manufactured very, very inexpensively, um, but it's not necessarily good quality. It might, and mostly it's the glare, it's the visual impact from the fixtures. And
Hmm.
in order to manage glare, I think a lot of us know that you need less bright fixtures and more of them. However, if there is no regulation that says you need to have um, a certain, or you can't exceed a certain metric in terms of glare, then nobody is going to pay attention to that. And so we need municipalities and authority figures to become more educated in terms of quality lighting and what it takes in order to create quality lighting, in order to say, we need you to not have a glare rating above 3 or something
Hmm.
like that. Um, and so, yeah, I think that
You have the same problem I
it's,
have.
yeah, I have the same problem.
Y-
Um,
Yep. Hmm.
it's capitalism, but like,
Capitalism.
what are we gonna do? Like,
I don't
we
think it's.
want everybody is
I
in
don't
it
think
to
it
make
has.
money,
I
right?
actually. I'll challenge you on the capitalism piece, but we sometimes we
Okay,
have to define it because
yeah,
I don't like when people say socialism and capitalism. I see those two things as inseparable from one another. So if somebody says to me I'm a capitalist or I'm a socialist, it doesn't make any sense to me because and I'm just going to say, so when I'm talking about it, I mean, all of us are socio-capitalists. I don't know anybody that
true.
doesn't believe in zero taxation. I don't believe in anybody that thinks they should build the road outside their business. So capitalism is the way in which we produce wealth, and socialism is how we redivide it. And what we're arguing about is where the bar goes. So this idea that someone's a socialist or a capitalist is silly, in my opinion, because we're
Yes,
all kind
that's
of socio-capitalists. And so to say that, I think the problem is the legal precedents. And if I've had the unfortunate um, the unfortunate opportunity to be involved in some legal cases that involved car accidents and someone dying. And I wasn't involved, but I was there as a support person and was very curious about the process. And what happens is the lawyers start pulling out all these codes, okay? And they pull out the Highway Traffic Act in Ontario, and they pull out the how do you build an on-ramp to a highway code. And then they look at
Mhm.
the signage codes, and then they look at the lighting codes. And they're just looking for areas of inadequacy or less than. They send out all manner of experts to measure light levels and to measure the distance between the sidewalk crossing and how the thing was signed and all this sort of stuff. If the number one barrier to darkness restoration and night preservation is the legal system, it is the regulations, because you're right. But the number one priority is making sure there's ample light in order
Mhm.
that you have met the standard. And if something happens and somebody dies or something serious happens, immediately the lawyers are going to be checking the light levels at nighttime, and almost always they will find inadequacies. And the
Right.
answer, unfortunately, from insurance companies, the insurance companies are another barrier to this, by the way. Um,
Mhm.
the answer is invariably more light. More light pollution actually is the answer. More sky glow is the answer. And that's a really big trap for this movement. And I really, Don, I don't know how we get out of that one. That's a tough one to
Well,
kind of
I think
solve.
that we need to goes back to what I was saying before. We need to define what the lumen is and what our regulations are actually based on. We need to think about what we need in order to see. And
Hmm.
so if there is a government agency that is saying we need to satisfy IES light level recommendations, um, is that light level recommendation um, for a daytime adapted eye, or is it for a nighttime adapted eye? Because right now, everything is the lumen is based on daytime adaptation. And so we are using much more light, I feel like, than what we would actually need to use. And so if we want to save the night skies and create, help promote darkness, then we need to look at reducing our intensities, because
Hmm.
just creating like full cutoff fixtures and full cutoff roadway fixtures, I don't think that's 100% the solution, because there's reflected light. And I recently attended Light Fair in New York City, and the keynote speaker was Lady Karen Trevino from US National Parks. And
Hmm.
she had mentioned that they um, followed this municipality that changed out all of their street and roadway lighting to from like a HID source over to 3000 K LED,
Hmm.
and they were very surprised to find that the sky glow condition actually got worse. And so I feel like what we're doing is we are pushing all of the light onto the horizontal plane, onto the ground,
Hmm.
and it's just reflecting up, because we're only focusing on how much direct light is being deliberately cast above 90 degrees. So we need to somehow change that focus to capture how much reflected light also is being um, traveling up into the night sky, let's say.
You're definitely correct that light is reflected even off asphalt surfaces. They can measure it. Okay. And so when you're seeing the famous picture of North and South Korea, with South Korea being super bright because of capitalism, and North Korea being super dark because, well, there is a difference between communism and capitalism, but we're not going to have that conversation. Those are
Yeah, yeah.
socialism and communism are different things. So, but I mean the famous picture, right? And that's light. Most of that light that you're seeing from space is re-reflected. It's not like the lights are all pointed up at the night sky, right? Most of them are pointed
Mhm.
down. Some of them are vertical advertising. Some of them are wall packs and these different kinds of fixtures that do create sky glow. But what you're largely seeing is the light coming off the roadway surface at night, and that's what's being re-reflected. But we also have to make incremental progress, and we have to try new things. But I would say that you talking about IES, I think the Illuminating Engineering Society needs to become the Lighting and Darkness Society. It needs to consider both sides. And like if you look at, and I don't know if they've changed it recently, but there's no maximum light levels. Everything's a minimum, right?
Yeah, they no. So they did actually come out with a new, or they've revamped their recommended practice for lighting exterior environments,
Mm,
and they do. I'm not 100% familiar with it, but
mm.
I I'm pretty sure that there are ranges now. It's
So
not
it's
just
recent,
a minimum
recent
light
developments.
level, right?
And
Yeah,
that's great. And but I really believe, and this is a personal opinion. It doesn't reflect the board of directors or anything like that. When you
yeah,
you mentioned earlier when you were talking that, well, you need more light fixtures if you're going to reduce the amount of light and shield it and do these other things. I think this movement is represents the single greatest opportunity for our industry. And I also see it as a moral responsibility to tackle. And that means to lead. I believe the IES should lead this, not see it as an afterthought, not think it as secondary, but make, in terms of exterior lighting, the number one priority should be darkness restoration and night preservation to the expense of all other things. And I know it sounds like it's an opinion. That's my opinion.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
I think all us capitalists are going to get rich, Don, if we are able to accomplish that, because that means almost every outdoor lighting fixture in North America and probably the world is in play for us to now change. So,
Right. So the IES has a lot of different issues that they try to help and address. And they are always, and they have always said that their recommendations are recommendations. The thing that I think is holding us up from progress is the fact that people are just going into the recommended practices and looking for a value and then coming out and going designing based on just that value. And but meanwhile, there's all this narrative that the IAS provides, talking about how to manage glare, how to protect night skies, things that you should consider. And if we a lot of people just look at how much more is that going to cost me, how much more engineering work is going to have to go into doing a design that is applies like that. And so they're looking for, is there some sort of benefit for me now? Is the project lead, or is, if it's not lead and if there's no reason to dive that deep into it, then we need to get in and get out and get on to the next job. And unfortunately, I don't think that anything that the IES can do can change that mentality. I think we are on the right track with providing incentives. I really like everything that I've seen that incentivizes things like well and lead. Um, and even to a certain extent dark sky, because they kind of are giving dark sky certification for manufacturers who make like full cutoff fixtures.
mm,
um, I think that people want to do good, and so if we can help them um, use this good, in a way that supports their business and increases their profitability, like they have done with Well and Lead, and um, with the little certification and the plaque that you can put onto the building. I think that's kind of going to draw more change than having some authority figure say, you must do this, right? So, um, yeah, I think that it's too, like, we have to kind of find a balance between this is the absolutely, minimum light level that you need for the state of adaptation, and then we're going to reward you for uh, doing this, or this is the positive thing that you're going to get of out of going that extra mile, I guess.
Yeah, the
And
Gucci
then
suit play, like you put on a Gucci suit, that's what the well certification is and the leads. I don't mean to denigrate it. Don't get that. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I mean, it's like
Mhm.
you get to put the plaque on your building, and people walk in, ooh, well certified, wow, right? That's what that business is, right? It's a Gucci
Mhm.
suit, and that's great. But let me ask you something. Do you believe that light pollution is pollution?
um yeah, yeah, I do. um because it's having an impact on all types of ecosystems, animals, and humans are part of nature as well. And
Hmm.
so if we are not preserving all of those other systems, then we're ultimately, causing a detriment to ourselves. And so every wasted lumen that we put into the night sky, um, and sorry, let me back. Like, I just
Sure,
had a thought here I want to interject with,
of course.
is that different species respond to different um, wavelengths of light energy differently. So, for example, um, turtles do better under the amber light. They're less impacted by that amber spectrum. But at the same time, bird migration, birds are attracted to red light, and so having a lot of red light cast into the sky could impact a different species of animals. And so we need to, and I'll keep going back to this, create light sources that mimic natural light. So right now, I feel like, or actually, yeah, every wasted light, every wasted lumen or photon, probably be a better way to describe it than light, um, is pollution. It is pollution. We need to have a good understanding of what it is that we're putting out into the environment, and are we overstressing something? Like, if we're putting out tons and tons of blue energy, and it is, this, I always think of light in terms of like sound. So if
The two are
you
very
could hear
similar.
blue, it would, yeah, if you could hear blue, it would have a really high pitched sound. If you could
Yep.
hear red, it would have like more of a, a low pitched sound. So if we're blasting out this high pitch energy,
Hmm.
we're disrupting all these different ecosystems. Then, even though we're visually under the radar and complying with what we believe to be good practice, then we're still polluting, we're not really getting anywhere.
So we agree that light pollution is pollution. It's not a metaphor.
Right.
Whose responsibility is it to broadcast this message and to make the light fixtures and to make the standards and to do all this stuff? Is it the lighting industry's responsibility, moral responsibility?
Yes, as a collective.
Are
I
we
don't
are
think that you can
ha,
pinpoint one
no.
person or one organization.
No,
No.
I agree with that. Have we accepted this as an industry yet?
I think we've accepted it. We just don't know what to do. A lot of people are just like, I don't really know how to solve this problem. I can talk to my client about all of these issues, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to make a decision based on whatever it is that they value. And so sometimes they're going to value um, darkness preservation, and it'll be a win. But sometimes they're not going to value that. Sometimes they're just going to value how to get it done quickly and economically, I guess. And
So
then also, what are they, how deep are their pockets? Like, if they can't afford it, but they need to provide adequate lighting for their
mm,
parking lot, and they're
sure.
a nonprofit, let's say, um, then somebody is offering them a fixture that is going to cost 50% less, but it's not necessarily going to be dark sky friendly. Then what are they going to do? Their hands are tied. So
Yeah, I know. I'm in the field every day. I understand
yeah.
those problems inherently. I mean, I have a very difficult time with this. But my point is this: is that everyone, when I hear I don't think the lighting industry has accepted this, and I don't think the lighting industry sees it as a moral obligation. I think they want it to be somebody else's problem. And just like the e-waste that's coming down the pipeline from the fixtures, not our problem, right? And but I think that if you look at how we solve these problems with extended producer responsibility programs that you hear about and all this kind of thing, I think the lighting industry, and this is just again my own opinion, and my opinions are mine. They don't reflect anyone else's opinion. I don't think very few leaders in the lighting industry have accepted what I believe is their moral obligation. And that is that light pollution is pollution, which means that it damages all living things on the earth. It wastes energy. If carbon emissions are your thing, climate change, then darkness restoration is the number one way to begin to mitigate climate change, actually, if you want to use less energy. And so, Don, I have a hard time believing that the industry has accepted it as a moral obligation. And I think that's what it is. I think that the industry needs to look at this, whether it's the IES or whatever organization, the DOE, the Department of Energy in the United States, Environment Canada, all these other big, colossal institutions that have significant amounts of power, actually, and could do something about this. They have to stop seeing it as something that's balanced and start accepting the moral responsibility for the problem. And that can then get into the lighting industry, and the lighting industry could say, you know what, actually, we're going to change our standards. We're going to change the way we go about making light fixtures. We're going to change all of these things. And yes, it's going to take time. And yes, it's going to take research. And yes, it's going to take education. And yes, it's going to take awareness creation and all these sorts of things. But when's the last time, either of us pulled out a lighting ordinance on light pollution? You could probably go down to the town of Uxbridge or Hamilton or Stony Creek, which is where you and I live in Ontario. So Americans, these are all small Ontario towns, and found the lighting in ordinance. You'd have to blow the dust off that thing, baby, because nobody has probably picked it up in a long time. And again, even with the bylaw officers, do they even know how to enforce a light pollution or a light trespass
So it's a
violation?
lot of education. I agree
Mm-hmm.
with you in that. We have some really fantastic municipalities that have
Mm-hmm.
superb lighting ordinances, but we also have a lot of municipalities that really don't know. So I'm actually also the vice president of IES Waterloo chapter. It's a new chapter,
Oh,
IES chapter
congratulations.
in Ontario. Thank you. And so one of our goals is to help to educate municipalities in terms of lighting quality
Mm-hmm.
and how to kind of write or put them in connection with the people that can help them write good ordinances. And then educate students as they come up and get them um, passionate about it, just as
Mm,
we're all passionate about all aspects of lighting.
sure.
And so I just feel like there's this disconnect between the science and the engineering, and we need to kind of come together and educate all of our whole society basically,
What,
because if there's no demand for it and people just don't know, then no matter what the lighting industry does, nobody's going to buy that.
can I make a
So
suggestion?
yeah.
instead of worrying about lighting quality, maybe talk about darkness quality too. You know,
Yeah, but
that has
you
a
can't have
quality.
one without the other,
That well, right now we have
right?
one, which is lighting. Everybody talks about lighting, 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 light levels. They don't talk in terms of darkness levels. And I think that's fundamentally what has to change. In my opinion, if the lighting industry is going to um, uh, accept its moral obligation with respect to this issue, then we have to become the lighting and darkness industry. And we have to provide darkness as well as light. And that means that doesn't mean no light. I'm not. I don't have my own lighting company, of course.
Right.
I want to sell lighting, and I think that darkness restoration, and this is the number one area where lighting control should be absolutely chasing
Oh
municipal
yeah.
street lighting. Like it's so obvious that that's the application for digital or connected lighting controls. But you don't see a lot
Mhm.
of that. You see everybody's talking about the interior environment. To me, the exterior environment's the most obvious place for that with tuning and dimming. Like, come on. I mean, this is really
Mhm.
powerful, a really powerful application that could do so much good. And then, so I think we have to accept it as a mandate. And I'm talking about me too. Like I'm looking in the mirror when I say that. Like I'm not
Mhm.
speaking from a high horse here. I'm part of the problem, just like
Well,
the rest
that's
of
why
us.
you're doing the podcast, right?
Yeah, that's right. But and I think with the problem is like with words, like we don't use the right. We're constantly saying lighting and we're never saying darkness. We're constantly measuring light levels and never measuring darkness. And we're
Right.
constantly talking about lighting quality and never talking about darkness quality. Darkness has a quality as well. And if you drive, whatever, if you and I got in a car and drove for 2 hours north of here and the sky happened to be clear, we would see what darkness quality provides in our lives. We would feel the beauty of the nighttime environments. And all humans had access to that until very recently. And we've lost that. And we need to get it back, Don. That's my opinion. So,
Yeah, I agree. We need, and I'm really into circadian lighting design, and I've noticed that there's a lot of focus on the daytime aspect of circadian stuff, but there is just as much importance to have darkness, which is easily achieved if you're in an interior environment. You can just always draw the shades,
sure.
right? But when you're in an outdoor environment, there's no shades. You have to dim. You have to apply controls, um, and so we need to have darkness. Like we need to
Have
celebrate
silence.
that.
Have silence.
Yes,
I think
yes.
one of my other guests, and I'm kicking myself. I got his name somewhere in these pile of papers, but great British fellow. He's working in a reserve in the UK, and they speak in terms of tranquility, and I really like that a lot. He's
Hmm.
speaking in terms of darkness and silence being, like heat and light, very similar waves. They're waves, right? And so
Hmm.
sound waves, light waves, right? So they speak in terms of tranquility, and those two things, going together in terms of light pollution and sound pollution. And so those things are always together. Light pollution and sound pollution come together, right?
Hmm.
In fact, they're almost the same problem, although light pollution could be solved, but could be incrementally reduced by different measures the lighting industry were to create. But when you talk about circadian, and I also have another podcast called the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, where
Hmm.
we've interviewed many of the scientists that discuss this issue. And to me, all of the circadian lighting that we could do for people boils down to improving their sleep. And
Yep.
the the improved sleep is what's actually providing the benefits of circadian lighting. And so there's this circle that a good quality designed lighting system by Don Brown or many of the wonderful designers that we have out there in the industry is going to contribute to you sleeping better, which in
Right.
turn then provides these downstream benefits. And a lot of times when people are talking about more alertness and less sick days, if you just put my lights in there, that's an
Hmm.
incomplete or that's a marketing strategy. That's actually
Right.
not what's happening, right? And
Hmm.
with that, and so if you and then and just to finish off on that, when we talk about being able to close our blinds, we're the only species that can do that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this kind of goes back to what we were saying before about all light is pollution, and that if we're negatively impacting any one component of nature, we're impacting ourselves.
Hmm.
So I think that we need to shift our mindset to understanding that we are all connected, and
Hmm.
humans are part of nature. And so by preserving our natural environment, which includes all of the little creatures and all the little critters out there,
Yeah, sure.
and creating more dark spaces and sanctuaries, not just for us, but for those guys out there, the
Hmm.
deer out there, the raccoons, everything,
Sure.
then we are helping ourselves. Even water, like marine animals, need darkness. So um, we all evolved under this day night pattern. So we definitely to change our mind shift to accept that we're all connected, and I think maybe that's and really we're all connected. We can't just rely on the lighting industry to be the trailblazers here. We have to recognize that the lighting industry is responding to the rest of the industries out there because they're our clients.
Mm.
So if if we increase the awareness of what it's doing to us collectively as a species, there I feel like it will all trickle back, and working together will allow us to move forward and solve a lot of these issues that we're faced with right now.
Don Brown, I've had a wonderful time speaking with you. This is one of my, I don't know why, but it's one of my favorite podcasts I think I've done on this show. So I
Oh,
thank you.
great.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And is there any final thoughts that you have for the Restoring Darkness listeners?
Um, keep going. Keep going. I feel like we have come so far, and we just we have to keep pushing forward and believing in our dream, and knowing that we are making a difference. And what you're doing now might not seem like we're progressing very fast, but we're kind of paving the way for future generations that are going to come and look at what we've done and take it that to that next level. And so don't get discouraged. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep talking. Keep doing podcasts. Do gatherings. Um, just keep talking about it. And eventually we will progress. There will be positive outcomes that
I've said a couple times on this show that,
come.
excuse me, I believe this is a 100-year issue. And here we are on the threshold talking about this.
Mhm.
And so I thank you all for listening out there. And I would encourage you to add darkness to your verbal repertoire when you're talking about lighting and throw it in there. The quality of darkness. How much of it do you have? Folks, thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Look no further for dark sky friendly products than Evluma. Since its first product launch, Evluma has carried one or more International Dark Sky Association certified models. If your customer cares about light pollution, suggest the OmniMax with shielding or the Area Max with full cutoff to reduce uplight and glare. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of darkness.